Welcome back, courageous listeners, to a tale that will crawl under your skin and linger long after the lights go out. Tonight we unravel the eerie experiences of Rachel, a young babysitter who thought her night would be spent keeping an eye on 2 children in a luxurious mansion. But what started as a routine job quickly spiraled into a sequence of unexplainable events. What would you do if the toys around you started moving? Not just shifting positions, but appearing where they shouldn't, as if they had a mind of their own. Rachel's story takes a darker turn when she ventures into the mansion's forbidden attic, only to uncover a sinister secret that will leave you questioning what's real and what's not. What ancient presence resides in that house? And who or what is really in control of the night? By the end of this story, you may find yourself wondering, are the scariest monsters the ones we see or the ones we don't? Prepare to be drawn into a suspenseful journey filled with unsettling sounds, mysterious voices, and shadows that move where they shouldn't. So grab a blanket, settle in, and let's begin The Babysitter's Nightmare. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you love diving into the unknown. But be warned, after tonight, you might never look at toys the same way again.
Hello, my name is Rachel, and I'm now 24 years old. But this story takes place when I was 21, juggling college classes during the day and picking up odd jobs wherever I could to make ends meet. When I saw the ad in the local paper, it felt like a godsend. Babysitter needed, 1 night, generous pay. The details were sparse, but the compensation was more than I'd made in months of part-time work. 2 kids, Emma, 8, and Liam, 5. Their parents, a wealthy couple, were attending a gala out of town. It was a 1-night job at a mansion on the outskirts of the city. A mansion. I'd never even been close to one before. I called the number listed and a woman's voice answered, polite, professional, but brisk. She didn't ask many questions, just confirmed my availability and gave me the address. "Be there by 6 p.m., she said before hanging up. The drive out there felt like stepping into another world. The city lights faded, replaced by winding roads flanked by dense trees that seemed to swallow the car whole. By the time I reached the long gravel driveway, the sun was beginning to set, casting the mansion in an eerie, golden light. The house stood at the top of a hill, its silhouette framed by leafless trees. It was massive, but not in a polished, luxurious way. The kind of massive that felt heavy, old. As I parked, the first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. No birds, no rustling leaves, just the sound of gravel crunching beneath my tires. I stepped out and stared up at the house. It was a pale gray with ivy creeping up its sides. A faint breeze made the shutters creak, and for a moment I wondered if I'd made a mistake coming here. The door opened before I could knock, revealing Mrs. Carter. She was elegant but cold, dressed in a sleek black dress that looked more like armor than evening wear. She ushered me inside without much conversation, pointing out the basics, the children's rooms, the kitchen, the emergency numbers. The inside of the house was even stranger than the outside. The ceilings were high, the hallways narrow, and the furniture looked as though it hadn't been touched in decades. Dust motes floated in the air, caught in the dim glow of antique chandeliers. "The kids are upstairs," Mrs. Carter said, her tone clipped. "They've already had dinner, and their bedtime is at 9. Just keep an eye on them and you'll have no problems." I nodded, trying to ignore the chill that seemed to creep up my spine. As she handed me a neatly folded stack of bills, half the payment up front, she added, almost as an afterthought, "Oh, and don't go into the attic. It's locked anyway, but just so you know." Before I could ask why, Mr. Carter appeared, ushering her out the door. They were gone within seconds, leaving me alone in the cavernous house. I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the unease. It was just one night. How hard could it be? But even then, as I climbed the creaking staircase to meet Emma and Liam, I couldn't shake the feeling that something about this house wasn't quite right. After settling into the eerie quiet of the mansion, I finally met Emma and Liam. Emma was 8, quiet but with a strange intensity in her gaze. Liam, at 5, had a mischievous grin but clung tightly to his sister. They were sweet kids, though a little different. Maybe it was the isolation of living in such a vast, lonely house that made them seem a bit withdrawn. Emma proudly showed me her favorite toy, a porcelain doll, delicate and intricately dressed in what looked like an old-fashioned gown. Its eyes followed you no matter where you stood, giving me an odd chill. Liam, on the other hand, clutched a wooden truck, its paint faded and its edges worn smooth from years of play. Unlike Emma, he didn't offer much explanation, just holding it protectively. As we played in the living room before bedtime, Emma spoke up in her soft, almost melodic voice. "The toys don't like to be alone." Her words hung in the air, and I couldn't help but laugh lightly, brushing it off. "Well, that's why you take such good care of them, right?" She didn't answer, just looked at the doll in her hands as if she were expecting it to respond. Liam remained focused on his truck, making soft engine sounds, oblivious to our exchange. By 8:30, it was time to get them ready for bed. The routine was straightforward enough. Brush teeth, read a story, tuck them in. Once they were asleep, I finally let myself relax, grateful for the peace and quiet. But that peace didn't last long. The first time I went to check on them, everything seemed normal. The kids were asleep, their toys by their sides. But when I checked again an hour later, I noticed something strange. Emma's doll, which had been tucked in her arms, was now sitting upright on the nightstand. Liam's truck, once resting on the floor by his bed, was across the room near the door. I thought maybe they'd woken up and moved the toys before falling back asleep. Kids do that, right? But as the night went on, the toys seemed to have a mind of their own, appearing in different places every time I looked. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Not by the children, but by their toys. Still, I told myself I was imagining things. After all, a creaky old mansion like this could make anyone's imagination run wild. Or at least, that's what I hoped. The old leather couch in the living room creaked beneath me as I settled in for a quiet evening. The children had gone to bed, their angelic faces barely visible beneath the warm glow of their nightlight. I'd found an old TV in the corner and managed to tune into a channel with reruns of a sitcom I vaguely remembered from my childhood. For the first time that evening, I felt myself relax. But then, just as I was beginning to lose myself in the laughter track, I heard a sound that didn't belong. A faint giggle, high-pitched and distant. It drifted down the hallway so soft that I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. Almost. Then came the unmistakable sound of small footsteps. Light, deliberate, and moving across the wooden floor above me. My heart skipped, and for a moment I froze, staring at the ceiling as the sound moved closer to the stairs. My rational mind told me it had to be Emma or Liam. Perhaps they'd woken up and decided to explore. I made my way up the creaking staircase, my bare feet sticking slightly to the cool wood. At the top, the hallway was empty, the soft amber glow from a wall lamp casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and shift with every step I took. Their bedroom door was ajar, and inside, they slept peacefully, completely undisturbed. I let out a soft sigh of relief. But as I turned to leave, something caught my eye. The toys. Emma's porcelain doll and Liam's wooden truck were no longer by the bedside table where I had last seen them. Instead, they were in the middle of the hallway, perfectly aligned and facing the stairs, facing me. It was as if they had been moved deliberately to watch. I bent down and picked up the doll first, her cold, lifeless face unsettling beneath the dim light. I shook off the unease and muttered, "You two are supposed to stay put." My attempt at levity fell flat, even to myself. With the truck tucked under my arm, I returned them to their rightful places. "Good night, again," I whispered to no one in particular, and closed the bedroom door firmly behind me. As I descended the stairs, I tried to shake the feeling creeping over me, the faint but growing suspicion that I wasn't entirely alone. The hours dragged on, and the weight of the night seemed to settle into the house. The old grandfather clock in the corner struck midnight with a low, resonating chime that sent a faint vibration through the floor. The sound felt heavier than it should have, like a reminder that the darkest part of the night had arrived. I was curled up on the couch, half watching an old movie, when I heard it. Soft, muffled whispers. My ears perked up, and I muted the TV, leaning forward to listen. The whispers grew clearer, unmistakably the voices of children, but not loud enough to make out the words. It was as if they were having a secret conversation. Emma and Liam, I thought immediately. Maybe one of them had woken up and was talking to the other. But something about the sound felt wrong. It didn't have the playful tone of two siblings giggling under the covers. It felt more like a quiet argument or plotting. With a lump forming in my throat, I made my way up the stairs. The whispers continued as I approached their room, then abruptly stopped when I reached the door. Pushing it open gently, I peeked inside. The room was bathed in the soft glow of their nightlight. Emma and Liam were fast asleep, their breathing steady and peaceful. They hadn't moved an inch since I'd tucked them in earlier. But then I saw it. The doll. It wasn't on the nightstand where I'd left it. Instead, it was perched high on top of the wardrobe, its lifeless porcelain eyes seeming to stare straight at me. My stomach dropped. How did it get up there? Swallowing the lump in my throat, I took a hesitant step into the room, my bare foot brushing against something on the floor. I glanced down to see the wooden truck lying there, slightly tilted, as if it had been dropped mid-motion. I bent down to pick it up, my fingers trembling as I reached for it, and that's when I heard the sound. A creak, faint but deliberate, like the slow groan of a door opening. My breath hitched and I spun around. The hallway outside was empty, but the faintest flicker of movement caught my eye. Something small and quick darted past the edge of my vision, disappearing into the shadows. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaking. No response. Only the oppressive silence that seemed to stretch endlessly through the house. And then I saw it. Just for a split second, something small darted out of the corner of my eye. A blur of movement that seemed to scuttle down the hall and vanish into the shadows. My breath hitched. It was too fast to see clearly, but its presence felt undeniable. Was it a trick of the dim light, my imagination? Or was something else lurking in the house? I froze at the top of the stairs, heart pounding as I listened to the rapid patter of footsteps below. The sound didn't belong, too quick, too light to be an adult, and far too strange to be the children. My grip tightened on the railing as I peered down, trying to catch a glimpse of whatever was moving. A shadow flickered across the base of the staircase, darting out of sight. Was it a cat? No. Its shape was wrong, unnervingly stiff, and its movements mechanical. My stomach tightened as an unsettling thought crossed my mind. It looked like a doll. "Who's there?" I called, my voice unsteady. The only response was the heavy silence of the house. Swallowing hard, I made my way down the stairs, each step creaking underfoot and amplifying my unease. At the bottom, a loud bang reverberated through the hallway, followed by the sharp click of a lock engaging. I jumped, my pulse racing, and instinctively turned toward the noise. It was the basement door. Standing at the far end of the hall, the old wooden door was closed, its handle glinting faintly in the dim light. I stepped closer, my breath shallow, my heart hammering against my ribs. I reached out, fingers trembling as I tried the handle. It didn't budge. The door was locked. I leaned in, my ear pressing lightly against the wood. Faintly, I thought I heard something. A whisper. Soft and muffled, as if it was coming from deep within the house. Whatever was down there, it didn't want me to come any closer. I stood there, staring at the basement door like it was staring back at me. My hand hovered over the handle, but I couldn't bring myself to touch it. This icy breeze was seeping out from underneath, and I swear it sent chills all the way up my spine. Something was down there. I didn't know what, but I could feel it. "Don't open that door, no matter what," the homeowner had said. Her words played on repeat in my head, like some kind of warning siren. But curiosity, yeah, it's a killer, and I've always been terrible at leaving things alone. Ugh, I muttered under my breath, stepping back. Nope, not my problem. I turned to walk away, trying to convince myself to let it go. But then the floor creaked under me, loud, like too loud. It was almost like the house was daring me to turn back. I stopped, glanced over my shoulder at the door again, and rolled my eyes. "This is such a bad idea," I whispered. But of course, I was already heading to the kitchen. I started rummaging through drawers, hoping to find, I don't know, something. A crowbar, maybe? A skeleton key? At this point, I'd take anything. The house was too quiet, except for the sound of me yanking open one drawer after another. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. And then I found it. In the very last drawer, shoved in the back under some random junk. There it was. A small rusty key. Like straight out of a horror movie. The thing looked ancient, with rough edges and spots of rust that flaked off when I picked it up. I held it up, squinting at it like it might come with a warning label. "Seriously?" I muttered, turning it over in my hand. "This is what's been sitting here all this time?" Part of me wanted to laugh. The other part wanted to drop it and run. Instead, I just stood there for a second, rolling the key between my fingers. Should I? I knew the answer was no, like hard no. But the thought of walking away and not knowing what was behind that door, yeah, that wasn't going to happen, not with my brain. Taking a deep breath, I clenched the key tight in my hand, "All right," I whispered. "Let's do this." I headed back to the basement door, my footsteps echoing in the quiet house. Every step felt heavier than the last, and the key in my hand suddenly felt like it weighed 100 pounds. This was either the dumbest thing I'd ever done or the start of something I'd never forget. My heart was pounding as I stepped into the basement. The creaky old door had barely closed behind me, and already I regretted giving in to my curiosity. The air was damp and cold, heavy with that musty basement smell, like old wood and something metallic. A single dim bulb flickered overhead, casting shadows that stretched and swayed across the walls like something out of a horror movie. My eyes were immediately drawn to the center of the room. There was this small round table sitting there, surrounded by what looked like symbols drawn on the floor. They were rough and uneven, like someone had scratched them into the concrete with shaky hands. Spirals, jagged lines, and markings I couldn't even begin to understand. It felt wrong, like I shouldn't even be looking at them. But then my gaze landed on the doll. Oh God, the doll. It was sitting right in the middle of the table, just staring. Its face was made of cracked porcelain, but it was the eyes that got to me. Bright red, almost glowing, like they were alive. They followed me, I swear. Every time I shifted even slightly, I could feel them on me, watching. The doll's little face was smiling, but not in a sweet, innocent way. No, this smile stretched too wide, showing a row of tiny, perfect teeth. And its hands, small and pale, were clutching this thing. It looked like a whip or a rod, frayed at the edges like it had seen way too much use. The doll's outfit, this old-fashioned maroon dress with a filthy lace collar, looked like it had been through a war. It was tattered and yellowed, stained with who knows what. Around it, scattered across the floor, were other toys. But these were different. They weren't the usual stuffed animals or plastic trucks you'd expect. These were bats with sharp, gleaming eyes. Vampires frozen mid-snarl, and werewolves with their mouths open, fangs ready to bite. They weren't just toys. They looked like they were part of something. Like they were arranged on purpose. Facing the doll at the center like some kind of audience. I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. It felt like the air was pressing down on me, thick and suffocating. I should have turned around and left right then, but I didn't. My legs wouldn't listen, and my eyes, they were stuck on that doll. Its cracked face and blood-red eyes daring me to come closer. Something was wrong here. Something was very wrong. I I barely had time to process what I was looking at when the door behind me slammed shut with a deafening bang. I jumped, nearly dropping the flashlight, and spun around. "Hello?" My voice cracked, and I cringed at how shaky I sounded. I reached for the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. I twisted it harder, yanking with all my strength. Nothing. "Come on," I whispered, panic rising in my chest. I banged on the door, the sound echoing in the eerie silence of the basement. "Hey, can somebody hear me? Emma? Liam?" But the only answer I got was laughter. Not the sweet, playful kind you'd expect from kids. No, this was different. It was soft, echoing, almost like it was coming from inside the walls. And then I heard my name, whispered, over and over like a chant. "Rachel, Rachel." I froze, the blood draining from my face. My breath came out in short gasps, fogging up in the suddenly icy air. The room felt smaller, like the shadows were closing in on me. I could feel it, someone watching me. My eyes darted to every corner, every shadow, but I couldn't see anything. "Stop it," I muttered to myself, my hands shaking as I clutched the flashlight tighter. "You're imagining things. It's just your mind playing tricks on you." But the whispers grew louder, the laughter closer. I stumbled back against the door, slamming my fists against it. "Please, somebody, help me. Let me out." The tears came before I could stop them, blurring my vision. I slid down to the cold floor, the flashlight slipping from my grip and rolling a few inches away. I pressed my hands to my ears, trying to block out the voices. "God, please help me. Get me out of here. I don't know what's happening, but I need you right now." For a moment, everything went quiet. No whispers, no laughter, just the sound of my own shaky breaths and the blood pounding in my ears. I looked up, hope flickering in my chest. Had it stopped? Had someone heard me? But then, footsteps. Slow, deliberate, and coming. I barely had a second to collect myself when I heard small, hesitant footsteps on the other side of the door. My heart leapt. "Rachel, are you in there?" Emma's voice was soft, almost scared. Yes, Emma, I'm here." I rushed to the door, my hands still trembling. "Please, can you open it? I'm locked in." There was a pause. I could hear her fiddling with the doorknob, mumbling something under her breath. For a terrifying moment, I thought she wouldn't be able to do it. But then, with a loud click, the door creaked open. I stumbled out, gasping for air, my heart pounding in my chest. I dropped to my knees and hugged her tightly. "Thank you, Emma. Thank you." But when I looked at her, her face was pale, her eyes wide and serious. "You shouldn't have gone in there," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Vladdy doesn't like it." It froze, the chill in her words hitting me like a slap. "Who's Vladdy?" I asked, my voice cracking despite myself. She glanced down the hallway, like she was afraid someone or something might be listening. Then she whispered, "He's the boss of the toys. And now he's mad." I blinked at her, trying to process what she was saying. "Emma, does he get mad at you?" My voice softened as I put a hand on her shoulder. She nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "Sometimes." "Oh, sweetheart, come here," I said, pulling her into a hug. My heart broke for her. This little girl living in this house with whatever was happening here. "Listen to me, okay?" I stood and walked to my purse, grabbing the small Bible I kept with me. I handed it to her, kneeling down so we were at eye level. "I want you to have this," I said gently. "Whenever you're scared, I want you to open this and read it. Or just hold it and ask God to protect you, all right? Can you promise me that?" Her small hands clutched the Bible tightly, and she nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Okay," she whispered. "Good girl," I said, wiping a tear from her cheek. "You're so brave, Emma." I decided that I wasn't leaving her alone that night. We went back to the kids' room where I tucked both Emma and Liam into their beds. Then I grabbed a blanket and curled up in the armchair near the window, watching over them as they drifted off. For the first time that night, the house felt peaceful. No laughter, no whispers, just the soft sound of their breathing. I don't know when, but eventually, I fell asleep too, with the Bible in Emma's hands giving me just enough comfort to let my guard down. The sunlight streaming through the curtains was the first relief I'd felt all night. Everything was still and quiet. No footsteps, no whispers, and most importantly, the toys were exactly where we'd left them. Emma and Liam were still fast asleep, their small faces peaceful as if the chaos of the night hadn't even touched them. I almost envied their innocence. When their parents arrived mid-morning, I wasn't sure how much I should share. I didn't want to scare them, but part of me thought they should know. I settled on a cautious version, mentioning that the night had been odd. "The toys seemed to move around a bit," I added with a nervous laugh, trying to gauge their reaction. Their smiles were polite but uneasy, and the mother said, "Oh, other babysitters have mentioned strange things before. I'm sure it's just imagination." She brushed it off with the kind of tone that suggested she didn't want to hear anything more. The father handed me the remainder of my payment, thanking me for taking such good care of the kids. I smiled, forcing myself to stay polite, but inside I couldn't shake the feeling that they knew more than they were letting on. As I walked out to my car, I glanced back at the mansion. The ivy-covered walls and old stone facade looked so peaceful in the daylight, like they were hiding the secrets of the night before. I lingered for a moment, thinking of Emma and Liam. Something about them made me feel protective, like they needed more than just a babysitter. "I'll come back someday," I murmured to myself, unsure if it was a promise or a warning. With a deep breath, I got into my car and drove away, the memory of that night lingering in my mind like a shadow I couldn't quite escape.
Rachel shares that she never forgot that night. The memory of those eerie whispers, the unsettling toys, and the children's strange warnings still linger. She admits that she's tried reaching out to the children's mother several times, but the phone calls always go unanswered. A part of her still wonders if Emma and Liam are safe, and she feels a deep, unshakable need to return one day, just to know for sure. Today, Rachel works at a successful advertising agency, but her passion lies in humanitarian volunteer work. She dedicates her free time to helping families facing challenges with their children. As a devoted member of her local Christian church, she finds solace and strength in her faith, using it as a foundation to make a difference in others' lives. But let me ask you, dear listener, do you believe this was all just Rachel's imagination? Or could something unexplainable, something beyond our understanding, have happened in that house? If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more chilling tales, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. And if you're ready for another haunting tale, we suggest Forgotten Lighthouse. In this gripping story, a young photographer ventures to a remote Cuban island, drawn by the mystery of an abandoned lighthouse. But what she uncovers is far darker than she ever imagined: haunting apparitions, forgotten tragedies, and a fight for survival. Click the video on your screen now, and we'll see you there.